Welcome. Today we have our first session with the amazing Judi Price. We want to just say thank you so much, Judi, for being here and for sharing the background and the wisdom and the power that you have with us. I wanted to start off just if you would let us know, you're doing a thing in April that is a retreat, and it's particularly around this thing that's called mind mapping. Scene
hmm
creation is what I've heard you say. Would you just give me a 2-minute taster of like what is that? What does that mean? What's a mind map? I mean, I think of mind maps as like ideas that are connected, but it sounds like it's a little more a lot more in depth than that.
Yes. Well, first of all, thanks, Dave. This is so great to be here with you. Um, I am a spiritual psychologist. I did a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And when you think of it, everything is created spiritually first before it's manifested in, physical world reality. Just like your dream to build this beautiful home. You have these ideas, and then you go into an architect and you say, this is my dream home. This is what I want. And they actually do a blueprint. So that is what mind mapping is: ideal
Okay.
scenes and mind mapping. So, in the retreat that I have in Park City, April 25th, 26th, and 27th, it includes a 2 night stay, 3 days, 2 nights at a luxury home. And you will get to mind map your deepest heart desires. And we're not talking about creating from the ego. So it's a different kind of creation. Those heartfelt desires that you actually sometimes are even afraid to say out loud. Like, this is what I really want. If I could really have what I want, this is what my heart is saying that I really want. And then we go to work on creating a mind map, an ideal scene around that area of your life. So it's very heart centered creation, co creating with God. And it's always such a great group of women, such a great group of women. It's always small and intimate. So I don't take any more than 10 women. So, anyways, yeah, so that's coming up at the end of April.
Beautiful. Really great. So, can I ask you a couple of questions about that?
Absolutely.
Jump in. So I have well, yeah, like one of my clients, I spoke with her yesterday and she has successfully avoided living in her car for the last 20 years.
Mm,
And every month she feels like she's going to lose everything and get kicked out of her apartment and be back on the streets and she frets and it's very disturbing for her, right?
mm.
Uh, And last night I was speaking with her and I realized that she had this, and it wasn't she had, this thing had her, this mental process or this spiritual horror had been created 20 years ago or whenever it was
Yeah.
created. And it has helped her keep a roof over her head and sufficient, not great, but sufficient food, on the table for the last 20 years. And it's terrified her all the way through. And it's like every month, it's like a Hail Mary at the end of the month, and all of a sudden everything's okay until the next month, and then it starts all over again.
Wow.
And it's she's like, why do I do this, Dave? Why? I'm like, isn't it amazing that you unintentionally created this way of being that terrifies you and takes care of you, meaning it helps you survive. It's done it successfully for 20 years. You're absolutely free to keep this as long as you want. And the thing that she was like is the thing that she said was, I've tried all these things. I've, done the visualization, I've done the gratitude, I've done all this, and it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, that's because this thing is eating you for lunch. You're
Yeah.
not going to be able to create. How do you deal with, how does mind mapping assist someone who has an unconscious mind map that is already, got the page covered, so to speak?
That's a great question. She's in her mind, she's up here, and she's not in her heart. And also, sounds like subconsciously it is what's running the show. So there's a lot of things that can support her, I'm certified in hypnosis, and you can go in and do some deep meditation, some deep mind meditation, get into that subconscious of the mind and start rewriting whatever those old conversations that she's having in her subconscious that are showing up in her consciousness. And yeah, so heart and mind. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the chakras. And so, first chakra, second chakra, third chakra, fourth chakra is the heart, fifth chakra is the throat, where you're speaking your truth. Sixth chakra is the mind. Seventh chakra is the crown chakra. This is your spiritual bank account. So when these upper chakras, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh, when they're aligned and they're working together and they're balanced, it's when you're speaking your truth, because your heart and your mind are aligned and you're speaking your truth. So that's some place for her to look also, is a balancing of her chakras and rewriting whatever is in that subconscious mind
Mhm.
that's running the show. There's a younger self, there's a younger part of her that is running the show. And yeah, just asking for that to come forward. So there's a lot of tools out there that could support her in finding peace in that.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. You want to give, so I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. I mean, I know it. I know some of your background. I don't know that I know all of it, but you and I have done some of the same trainings, and then you've gone far beyond where I have gone. But yeah, would you just share a little bit of your background?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love to learn. I love seeking and learning and understanding. So, I've been married for 40 years, and my husband's a physician. We have four adult children. But where let's see, I look back, grew up on a farm. My dad is Russian. My grandparents were immigrants. And so I grew up with a really strong work ethic and a really good, solid work ethic home life. I felt very, very fortunate. Went away to college, and I will say I got married at a young age, very trusting, had a child, and then unfortunately I went through a divorce. But actually, it was probably one of the best. I didn't think it was good at the time, but I was a single mom and I was finishing my college degree. And so my husband Ron and we met our senior year of college. And basically we got married a few years later, and then we had three more children together. So here I was still dealing with my hurt and my pain and my wounds. I call it my woundedness, which was really getting in the way of my ability to really love. And so I was introduced to the Landmark Forum, and my son actually did it before I did. So I did the Landmark Forum. Uh, Definitely fabulous curriculum. So I'd done the forum, did the advanced course a year later. Was very confronted about it. It was like, oh my gosh, I get to be responsible for my life. And went through all the curriculum. Then I coached, went through another 7-month leadership course, coached that course. And I knew I wanted to further my education. So that's when I found University of Santa Monica, and I did my master's degree in spiritual psychology. There was an option to go back for a third year in consciousness, health, and healing. So I went back. Dr. Mary Holnick had written that year of curriculum, and it was really fabulous. Um, so I did that. At the same time, I had an opportunity to do the Being a Leader course with Werner Erhard and Dr. Michael Jensen out of Harvard. They had written an academic leadership course. And so I was in heaven, being in that course and getting to thank Werner and talk to him personally. Fast forward a couple, maybe a year or two later, I was invited to be on the team, the support team for the leadership course. So I was on that team for 7 years. Um, got to be in the prep room with Werner and Steve Zaffron and Dr. Michael Jensen and support those courses all over the world. Um, got to go to Dubai, got to go to Abu Dhabi. We did the courses there. Singapore, Cancun, Bermuda, Whistler, Canada. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience to kind of have a front row seat. And yeah, the Being a Leader course is fabulous. If anyone is interested in doing that Being a Leader course, there is Jerry Echevarria that's still producing that course. And contact me if anyone who wants to know about it. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey and some of the people we studied in my spiritual psychology curriculum was, Jean Houston, Joe Dispenza, Carolyn Meese. So I did some coursework with Carolyn Meese in Sedona about 10 years ago. And then, yeah, Joe Dispenza, I did some work with him up in Sedona. And then Jean Houston, probably, gosh, it was before the pandemic. Uh, Jean Houston opened up her home, and I went to Oregon and spent 4 days in her living room with 12 other people. And I mean, just it was such an intimate, wonderful, wonderful experience at Jean's. And I just look at my journey of healing and creating a marriage, family relationships that I never dreamt of. The love that I experienced with my husband is far deeper and just awesome. I am free to love. I am free to express who I am, which then makes those that I'm around experience the freedom to love. So when I healed, all those around me heal, which is a principle of spiritual psychology. When you heal the world.
Mhm.
So I'm on a journey to support women and men to heal, to love, to understand what's going on, you know, in our hearts and our minds and our consciousness, our subconsciousness. Who's driving the car? A lot of times I'll say, well, who's driving the car? Or are you a passenger over here in the car? If you're a passenger, let's put you behind the steering wheel and looking forward and not through the rearview mirror.
Mhm.
So um, I just have a lot of different tools and modalities, things that I use when I'm working with clients one on one and when I'm teaching. Uh, there's, yeah, everybody can heal. Everyone can heal and move forward and create.
Mhm.
Because when we're stuck and we're not healing and we're judging, we can't create a future because we're stuck. So I'm all about getting unstuck.
Mhm. Really great. Well, if I can ask you about I didn't realize that was one of the principles of the
Spiritual psychology.
yeah,
Yeah.
spiritual psychology. Is it kind of like a permission slip? Like when people see you heal, they also were like, "Oh, I can do that too," or is it more along the lines that it simply happens because you have done that, therefore others are healed in your presence? What does that look like?
Well, when you heal, there's something more that you're offering others. I think, gosh, I didn't think of it that way. It's just a natural thing. When you're around people that it just feels good to be around them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you feel free, you feel loved, you feel seen, you feel accepted. Now, I'm not perfect at it. I'm not perfect at it.
Who
because we're
is?
all human, because
That's
we're all
right.
human. But I will say one of the tools, and I teach this in one of my retreats and in classes. Um, Whenever there's a disturbance in your internal peace, there is an opportunity for healing and for growth. So whenever I have a disturbance, like, oh, I'll just say where I get hijacked or where I get hooked, or um, yeah, so whenever there's that disturbance, if you can train yourself to look, oh, what is that? What is that inside of me that just hooked me?
Hmm.
And so it's an opportunity for one to heal and one to grow because we all have an opportunity to grow spiritually. I call it spiritual maturation. So that, I just had an appointment with one of my clients yesterday, and I just get so excited because it's like, oh my gosh, can you see, your spiritual maturation where you're at today versus, a year ago, even 6 months ago?
Hmm.
Um, that she's able to process herself. She's able to go in and do any healing work that she needs to do and release any judgments that are there that she has about herself or that she has out there. So it's a whole process. It's a whole package. I am processing myself all the time. Yeah.
Good to know
So
you're human.
say that again.
That it's good to know that you're a human. I love
Yes.
that.
Yes. Um, I think what happens is when you really understand um, how spiritually you're processing things and the judgments that are coming up, or um, you're able to get over things really quickly. I used to say I used to be mad at my husband for this long.
Hmm.
Now I'm mad at him for about this long. It's very quick. Um, Issues are resolved quickly. Forgiveness, it happens with velocity. Things move so much faster. So when things are moving and processing through you, you don't get stuck
Hmm.
and you're back in your saddle. You're back causing and creating futures or creating your world or creating loving relationships. So when you can grow and heal, life is just a lot better.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful what you said. If I may share something, I remember when so I did the landmark forum and the curriculum down in Salt Lake City, which is about a 5, 6 hour drive for me. And I was in the leadership body as well for about 7 years. And so I drove between here and Salt Lake a lot
Yeah.
to participate there. And I was driving home after a seminar one day. I was in the middle of the desolate nothingness that's between Idaho and Utah. It's not super long, only a couple, 100 miles or so. And there were no other vehicles on the road. It was like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remembered something that is a moment of disrespect that had happened in high school, some 20, 22, 23 years at that point before. And I got enraged by myself driving down the freeway at 80 miles an hour, just like, ah, you know, and I noticed, wow, I had no idea that that had stuck to me that long, that I had not, dealt with that. And that was a beautiful moment of recognition of stuckness. Noticing that I was stuck is like, okay, I've got these tools now. Can I unstuck myself? Can
Mhm.
I get free from this? And it took about 100 miles, but I got free of it. Just on my
Ah,
own. And I've gotten, like you said, it used to be that I would get really angry and I'd be angry for days or hours. Now I get really angry and I'm angry for a minute or a few seconds, right? So it's really, I love what that distinction of that we're human until we're done, and everyone gets hooked from time to time, and it's just a matter of how quickly you can release the, let go of the hook, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, as human beings, we get tired. Uh, my husband, if he has worked late at the hospital or, and he comes home and, I'm trying to discuss something with or whatever. And I mean, he's not fresh to have a conversation with.
Right.
And, he might say something that might upset me, but when I can step back and go, oh, yeah, he just pulled a 24-hour shift, or he just was, pulled a 15-hour shift or whatever.
Hmm.
And you don't react as much, and you're able to step back and I call it another principle of psychology or of spiritual psychology. These are some of the principles in our program, giving people the dignity of their process
Hmm.
and giving yourself the dignity of your process, which that's something else I teach in my retreats. We don't need to solve someone else's problem. We can give them the dignity of their process and whatever they're going through. And then also give me the dignity of my process and understanding what I'm going through and what I'm trying to resolve.
Hmm.
And yeah, Dr. Mary Holnick used to always say, give give people the dignity of their process.
Like great.
No, I want it to happen now.
Right.
That's the ego.
That's right. Oh my. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's beautiful. What would you be willing to share like one of the latest hooks in your life that where you got hooked and where you noticed it and walk us through that process just as a real world experience?
Yeah, geez, I really don't remember them that, I don't because they disappear so quickly. I think probably, yeah, my husband had worked a 20, when he's on labor and delivery, and there's a little call room that they get to sleep in, but it depends on how busy the 24 hours was.
Hmm.
And I can't remember what exactly happened. And I can't remember what we were discussing or talking about or something. And, I was probably like, well, I didn't like something he said or responded or something. I can't remember. I can't remember what it was. But then I was able to step back and go, oh, wow, he hasn't had a lot of sleep. And I'm committed to being back in loving. I really am. It's what I did an ideal scene around, just being in this loving marriage. Which by the way, my ideal scene workshop is the one that's the end of April. And I
Hmm.
had done a ideal scene around my marriage like 15 years ago. And it is really committed to going back into being in the loving as fast as possible. And so yeah, it was something that we were interacting with. And I can't remember what it was, but I remember coming back into loving fairly quick, just fairly quickly.
Hmm.
And I will say, so this is a tidbit for women out there. Um, in marriage and in relationships, when you cannot blame, when you can take 100% responsibility for how you're showing up in the relationship, what ends up happening, let's see, what ends up happening through coaching, through retraining yourself and understanding the depth of how powerful this is when you take 100% responsibility for how you're showing up, the things you're saying. You're not taking responsibility for how the other person acted. but you're taking responsibility for how you contributed. And then when you make a new promise, like, okay, well, next time I'm not going to fill in the blank, it really actually levels the playing field where you can get back to loving a lot faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that
I'm not sure if I'm
I don't know if
explaining
that's
it
just
really
for
well.
women though. I mean, if I'm that seems like it would work just as well for
It does. It does.
a
But
man
since
as
I'm a
well.
woman
Hmm.
and I experienced this in my marriage years ago when I became really clear that I could take 100% responsibility, no matter what my husband said or did, or that when I took 100% responsibility and I created what was how I was going to start responding and being newly and making a promise that, next time I could feel myself being in a situation, a reactive situation, but I was committed to being loving and maybe listening and understanding. It completely changed the playing field and how him and I would communicate, how him and I cleared the air, I mean, it was amazing. And and it also created the space for him to feel safe to say, hey, I'm sorry I said this, or I'm sorry I did that, because I had already was committed to creating that space to be clear in communication, to be loving, to be, and, quick to forgive. I call it forgiveness with velocity.
Forgiveness with velocity. Hmm, that's that's a tasty treat. I like that.
And
Yeah.
and it's something that it's it's a practice and understanding how it moves through you. It's not like, oh, forgiveness with velocity, I have to forgive. That's not the context in which I'm speaking.
Hmm.
It's you actually experience it. It's leaving you. The
Hmm.
judgments are leaving your body.
Okay. So it's a physical or a visceral almost
Hmm.
experience or
Hmm.
spiritual experience, I suppose you could also say.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Ah, that's amazing. When you say responsibility, I have a context from Landmark that's a little different from the regular textbook
Correct.
definition of responsibility. Would you distinguish responsibility from, say, blame or fault?
Yes. So, which, yes, I have that. There's a quote by Werner Erhard on responsibility, which is a fabulous quote. And I actually go over that document with the client. Usually it's pretty early in when I'm working with people. We
Hmm.
go over that document line by line by line by line on responsibility. And in that document, responsibility is not blame, shame, guilt. I should have it memorized by now, but it's none of those things. Responsibility is your ability to respond and how powerful you are to resolve and cause, a new future with what you're dealing with that's in front of you. Um, there's also a good video on YouTube by, oh, I can't remember his name. And he does one on responsibility versus fault.
Hmm.
Will Smith. So you can
Okay.
look up Will Smith, responsibility versus fault. It's really a great video. So usually when I'm working with a client or I have a new client, um, we go over Werner Erhardt's document line by line by line by line. And the other thing I do with my client is I go in and I edit. I edit where and I put their name in it,
Hmm.
wherever I can put their name in it, I replace their name on that responsibility document. And then I have them read it out loud to themselves so it can get inside their psyche. And, we'll come back the next week and we'll look at that document, and see where they're powerfully living their life.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I like them to watch the Will Smith video too on responsibility and fault.
Mm-hmm.
So those are anybody that's listening can yeah, go find that information and and work with it. It's very,
Mm-hmm.
very powerful information.
Very nice. Wow. Okay. What where does compassion come into this experience of forgiveness that you were talking about earlier?
Okay. So compassionate self-forgiveness, again, is from my training in my master's degree program. Compassionate self-forgiveness is probably I would say for me, the most powerful experience that I had in my curriculum in my master's degree. Um, when we think of forgiveness, we think of forgiveness out here, which is a different kind of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness in here, self forgiveness is completely different. And having compassion for oneself is a whole nother ball game. I taught a compassionate self forgiveness class in a group of men, and I love teaching men compassionate self forgiveness. And I was up in Scottsdale, and actually, one of my clients was in that class. And I will never forget when he said to me, I don't know what it feels like to be compassionate. I was like, wow, wow. And so the other thing is, compassion is in here. It's in the heart chakra. It's not up here. And so when when I'm working with people and I'm doing self-forgiveness work, it's helping them learn to come down from the ego and coming down into the heart chakra. So dropping down, coming down here, because the ego, it doesn't make sense. Forgiveness doesn't make sense. And so the ego wants to hang on, wants to control, and wants to protect.
Mm-hmm.
There's good things that the ego actually does, but learning how to let the heart and the soul lead, let the ego follow, and drop down into the heart and feel compassion and feel self forgiveness. So it's an experience. Again, it's an experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you can read about, it's learning to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. I've had a couple of clients that the entire purpose of their coaching was to help them feel like they were living their
Mm.
lives entirely in this mental, intellectual space, including all their feelings. They didn't feel their feelings, they intellectualized them and thought about them, and that was their version at the time of feeling. But it wasn't feeling, and it was, excuse me, one of my clients, he was the most intellectual person I had ever met in my life. Like he did not feel feelings for him were really, really threatening. He married this wonderful woman who is one of the deepest, most connected, divinely connected feelers I have ever met in my life. And you can imagine that when they were speaking, there was this wide gap of no man's land that caused all sorts of fun things. Um, when when we got him to he was willing to feel, he just didn't know how. right? If the
Correct.
person is not willing to feel, it doesn't matter what you do, right? They're not going to.
Well, they're probably not asking for coaching.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But when he began to feel, when we were able to move his focus or his point of focus from his mind to his heart, it
Hmm.
opened up a new world for him.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you when you bring people down from the head to the heart, that's a for some people that's a long journey. So I'm interested to know if there's anything you could share with like in this moment, if I notice that I'm in my head and
Hmm.
and I desire to get to a calm space or to a heart-centered space, how do I do that with velocity?
With practice.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's great, because men are they more think this way. And women were feelers, so there's nothing wrong with that. That's why men and women, they balance each other out very well. But it's really good for the woman to also, um, have an intellectual drive, and, the man to be able to drop down into the heart. Um, and to understand how to move back and forth, because you can
Mm-hmm.
feel it. You can
Mm-hmm.
actually feel it. So, I tell people, when I want you to think of when you experienced a deep, deep level of love. And a lot of them will be like when, a child was born,
Mm-hmm.
when I got married. Um, Maybe it's a pet, an animal. Maybe it was an experience with a grandmother or grandparent, or a place where they felt deeply loved and experienced love. So I have them go there, put their hands on their heart chakra, and drop down. Um, there's a 5-minute silent meditation that I sometimes have them go down and listen. And so it is a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning how to drop down there. It's not like you got to stay there all the time,
Mm-hmm.
or but it's being aware of how powerful the heart chakra is.
Yeah.
The heart chakra is where all of Christ's teachings are. This is where you heal. And all of Buddhist teachings are in the sixth chakra.
Hmm. I've never heard that before.
I now I'm quoting Carolyn Meese.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it makes sense. And when you think about the heart, this is where jealousy is. This is where forgiveness is. This is where betrayal is. This is where, again, forgiveness and love, those things. So people, when they've been hurt and betrayed, which everyone that's walking on this earth has been betrayed,
Mm-hmm.
and we've all experienced hurt in one way or another, that's when people start to cut themselves off, and they live up here, and they won't allow themselves to go down and experience that deep, deep level of love, which is available to them. But it's scary because there's wounds down there that there's an opportunity to heal those wounds.
Yeah.
So when those wounds can heal, oh my gosh, the heart is such a beautiful open space.
Yeah. Well.
So I always joke, entered into this marriage, and I had a lot of woundedness. I'd been betrayed, I'd been hurt before. And, yes, I love my husband, but I would only open my heart so much. And when I went in and I did the healing work that needed to be healed, yeah, my heart opened wide. And then that bond and that connection grew deeper and just was a lot more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what's available to people. And it is a journey, and it's work. And it's good to be with someone that you trust, that you feel good working with, that you can open up and be vulnerable. Yeah,
Beautiful. I love that. And I keep saying beautiful because it is. It's gorgeous.
it is.
You
It
know, there's
is.
I don't know if you've read or gone through the Way of Mastery,
Mhm.
but one of my favorite quotes from there is, well, paraphrased, is that the mind was never meant to be in charge. It
Yeah.
was designed to be a a servant, a rather
Mhm.
foolish servant of the heart. And yet, in our lives, it seems like everything is geared to have the mind be in charge. So I love the heart-centered nature of what you're up to.
Yeah, I have a quote in my calendar, and I think it says, let the ego serve your essence. The soul needs to grow and not be protected by the ego. Yeah.
Mm,
So let the ego serve. The soul needs to grow and not be protected by the ego.
mhm, mhm. Wow. So another thing's coming up for me in relation to this heart conversation, which is I was listening to a program that Dr. Joe Dispenza put out on Gaia.
Mhm.
And he was talking about how back in 1991 or 94, I forget which year, they discovered that there were um, basically neural networks, like a mini brain that exists in the heart. You know, the brain has,
Yes.
I don't know how many neurons, right? But the heart has these areas that have like 40,000 neurons, like brain pieces of the brain that somehow live in the heart, right? And that the communication is not from the mind to the heart, it's from the heart to the mind, like 90%. And then there's like feedback and, you know,
Mhm.
speed control mechanisms or whatever it is that comes from the mind, from the brain. What I mean, is that just to allow communication between those, do you think? What does that mean to you? I mean, he was basically saying we have the ability to think with our hearts, to
Yes.
experience and have a heart-led life. Is that what it means to you, or is there anything, yeah, what does that mean to you?
No, and I agree. Yes, and I know that there's a lot of research that's done around, is it the heart brain? I can't remember. Um,
Like the heart math people, is that what you're talking
yeah,
about?
the heart math people. Yes,
Hmm.
that's what I was thinking of. Absolutely. And then there's the neural pathways. And and then there's all of our cells. We store everything throughout our body, all of our feelings and emotions and our cellular, and what we experience.
Hmm.
And it's stored in our cells. And when we can release, I always say the judgments or those things and rewrite what we need to rewrite and release and let go and heal. Yes, then we experience ourselves of these loving human beings and we see the world as this opportunity to cause and create, and we're not offended. We move on, we move past things that we need to move past. Whenever we sit in that stagnant space of being stuck and there's judgment there, your heart hurts. You're not aware of it because a lot of times people shut it off.
Hmm.
But when you go up to the brain, okay, so I haven't studied all of this, but the neural pathways, um, I tell people it's like a wagon wheel. You're stuck in the mud
Hmm.
and you keep those neural pathways, you're digging them deeper and deeper and deeper.
Hmm.
And to move through and get that wagon wheel out of that stuck in the mud and get moving on your way where you're causing and creating futures versus staying stuck.
Hmm.
But people have to be aware that they're stuck.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I think the world as a whole, um, there's a lot of victim mentality versus creator mentality.
Hmm.
And it's just because they don't know that there's another way.
Yeah.
So becoming aware and realizing that you are a creator, you're not a victim, and you can cause things, complete that past, heal that past, be in the present, look to that future. That's when life changes.
Mhm.
So,
That's beautiful. I love that. The thing that comes to my mind is that the worldview of victimhood is a win-lose game. Life is a win-lose game. You either win or you lose,
mhm,
and there's no other options there. Whereas when in the creator mindset, it's a non-zero sum game, which means everybody can win. And
mhm.
it's designed for everybody to win because if somebody's created something like that's amazing, what can I create? And you create your, whatever it is that you're up to creating, and those two things can exist at the same time and you've both won.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But, some people, it's Groundhog Day for them every day.
Hmm.
So, and they don't know anything different.
That's
And
right.
so it's understanding that there is a difference.
Right. Yeah. Well, back to my client that I spoke about at the very beginning, Groundhog Day is it's Groundhog Month, I suppose, but you know, uh, it's such an interesting thing to see the exact same conversations come through, and there'll be like a spot where there's different conversations, and then they're all back in in the groove, so to speak, in that deep
Yeah,
neural pathway groove.
yeah.
Uh,
I would suggest, yeah, some deep meditation, deep meditation, maybe some hypnotherapy or something to help break up, yeah, what's going on there,
yeah.
those conversations.
Hmm. Have you watched Groundhog Day recently? Have you
No,
seen it recently? Man,
no,
I love that show. I have
I
watched it
probably
a
should.
lot. I watched it on Groundhog Day of this year just because Penny and I were both sick in bed, and I'm like, "Hey, it's Groundhog Day. Let's watch Groundhog Day."
Oh my gosh.
I'd
Oh my gosh.
forgotten
Oh.
how good that was. Yeah, um, the guy that wrote and directed that was the guy that played Egon in Ghostbusters. Harold Ramis, I believe. Yeah, he's passed away a long time ago now, but they somebody asked him how long um, the protagonist was in that cycle, and he said, "Oh, about 10,000 years." And I, whew, that's that shocked me, but it's such a beautiful show because of the transformation that eventually occurs as he bumps into all the things that life's him with. Yeah. Well, yeah. So I want to just open it up and see is what you would love to share with us at this point. I don't,
Hmm.
the question is, if you had the attention of the entire world for an hour, what would you share? Which is a pretty broad question, but what's coming through? What would Spirit like you to share with us right here and right now?
Well, I think I shared with you earlier before we got on, probably a passion of mine is compassionate self-forgiveness and helping people understand what that is, because it's like, you hear it, it goes into the cognitive mind. You're like, okay, that's all great. But how does it actually happen? How do you experience it? How do you learn to process it?
Hmm.
So when I teach it, it's a step-by-step process.
Hmm.
So, there's always a trigger. There's always something that I call it the disturbance in your internal peace, or another way, you get bucked off your horse,
Hmm.
you're just not, something's not right. And you just get to start doing some self-reflection and look at where the judgments are and what those judgments are. And now you can do it cognitively,
Hmm.
but when you actually do it from the heart chakra, you'll feel you'll feel a shift in your body and in your mind and in your spirit.
Hmm.
When I do a retreat, I break the people up into groups of three, which is called trio work, and it's just a beautiful thing, because each one of them is supporting each other and releasing whatever it is that that they have an opportunity to release.
Hmm.
And it's always a beautiful thing. Um, let's see, what else? Uh, I just love the work that I do. Um, Helping clients find peace and love, and releasing the gunk that just is getting stuck, which then opens up for new relationships, opens up for, again, creating futures, opens up for healing in marriages. I've had women do my retreats, and I've had, a husband call up, "What did you do to my wife?" you know, I don't even recognize her. And nothing makes me happier. Nothing makes me happier is when people go home and they see their life through new lenses,
Hmm.
which then they're taking new actions, which then they have tools, and they're like, "Oh, so yeah, it just really makes me joyful."
Wonderful. We're going to have a long, we're going to have an entire podcast for this compassionate self-forgiveness, because that is a process, a way of being, a method that I think the entire world can be blessed with. I was taught that when I was coaching with Steve Hardison, who also has
Hmm.
a master's degree in spiritual psychology, and it was very interesting. He's like, "Dave, this isn't a process." Like, it's not. What? My mind's like, "What? What do you mean there's not steps?"
Well, when I teach it, I teach steps and I teach a process so we can get our head around it
Uh-huh.
and then drop into the heart. And then you start to experience the flow.
Right.
Yeah. But
Well,
yes, absolutely. It's a way of being, and it's an experience that you have within yourself.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, the Holnicks, Ron and Mary Holnick wrote a book called Loyalty to Your Soul.
Yep.
And the process that they give a process for it in that book. Um, and I read that book like 20 times. I never went to University of Santa Monica, but I feel like I graduated with at least a certificate because of the number of times I read that book.
It's a wonderful book. Wonderful book. In fact, the year I was there is when that book came out, was Loyalty to Your Soul. And I
Hmm.
know that they wrote another book.
Yeah,
Um, I
yeah,
can't remember the name of that second book, but
yeah,
yeah, I am forever grateful to Ron and Mary Holnick for the education that they put together
yeah.
and for the opportunity that I had to experience it with them.
Me
So,
too. And
yeah,
I got to
yeah.
tell them I was on their like the one of the last calls that they did and before they retired, and got to share with them the number of times I read that book and what a difference it made in my life, and they were surprised by the number
Ah!
of times I'd read it, but it was such a pleasant surprise. I think it was really quite
It
wonderful.
is. It's a fabulous book. So yeah, Loyalty to Your Soul by Ron and Dr. Mary Holnick.
Yeah,
So anybody listening, pick that book up. It's yeah, really
worthwhile.
a great
Definitely.
book.
Yeah.
Really a great book.
Well, wonderful. Well, Judy, thank you so much for spending this time with us today, and yeah, we'll look forward to meeting up again for the next episode and onward and up.
Yeah.
Anything you'd love to say as we complete, including please the time and date again, and how to enroll in the April course on mind mapping.
Oh, yes. So first, thank you, David. Dave. Thank you, Dave.
Either
It's
works. All good.
thank you. Just that I was able to share my heart and anybody I can, touch or they hurt anyone that heard anything. It was worth it to me to take the time today. You can find me at judypricewisdom.com. And if you want to be on my email list, there's a place on my website where you can put your name and email. And my retreat is in Park City, Utah, April 25th, 26th, and 27th, 3 days and 2 nights in a luxury home. And then you get to come over to my house for the daytime and do mind mapping and the retreat. And you'll feel loved, you'll feel taken care of. And it's just a small group of women. So, yeah, go to the website. You'll find out some information about that. And anything else, you can shoot me an email at judy@judypricewisdom.com. So, Dave, thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. My pleasure. All right.
Very
Thanks.
heartfelt. All right. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.